Welcome to EduCasts, home of EduCasters. The developmental curve, theory of mind. It is important for educators to realize that metacognition isn't something we are born with. It develops. Flavell was instrumental in researching theory of mind, which is the understanding that others have thoughts and perspectives different from our own. Young children are notoriously bad at metacognition. If you ask a 5-year-old to memorize a list of items, they will often say they can do it easily. They have an illusion of competence. They don't know what they don't know. Flavell's research showed that while young kids have the hardware, the brain power, to memorize, they lack the software, the strategies. As kids hit middle school and high school, the potential for metacognition skyrockets, but it doesn't always happen automatically. This is a crucial point for teachers. We often assume that by the time a kid is in 10th grade, they know how to study. That is a dangerous assumption. Many students coast through elementary school on raw intelligence, never needing to develop metacognitive strategies. Then they hit a wall in high school or college, calculus, chemistry, advanced literature, and they crash and burn because they have no plan B when things get hard. Educational implications. Putting theory into practice. So knowing all of this, what do we do on Monday morning? How do we take Flavell's theory out of the psychology textbook and into the classroom? It boils down to making the invisible visible. 1. Modeling the thought process. Teachers are experts. We have expert metacognition in our subject areas. When we solve a math problem on the board, we usually just write the steps. Flavell would argue we need to speak the thinking behind the steps. We need to say things like, I'm looking at this equation and it looks tricky because of that negative sign. I better circle it so I don't lose track of it. Or in an English class, I'm reading this sentence and I honestly don't know what ephemeral means. I'm going to look at the context clues. By thinking aloud, we show students that confusion is part of the process, not a sign of failure. We model the monitoring and regulation that Flavell described. We show them the internal dialogue that they should be having. 2. Explicit strategy instruction. We cannot hope students will pick up strategies by osmosis. We have to teach them explicitly. This relates back to Flavell's strategy variables. We need to teach students not just what to learn, but how. This means devoting class time to teaching note-taking systems like Cornell Notes, mnemonic devices, and reading strategies. But, and here's the kicker, we also have to teach the conditional knowledge. We have to teach them when to use these strategies. A hammer is a great tool, but it's useless for tightening a screw. Students need to know which strategy applies to which task. 3. Promoting self-reflection. To build person knowledge, we need to force students to look in the mirror. This can be done through exit tickets or learning journals. Instead of just asking, what is the answer to number 5? We should ask, how confident did you feel about your answer to number 5? Or, what part of the assignment gave you the most trouble? This forces the student to engage in the monitoring and evaluating phases. Over time, this builds that database of self-knowledge. They start to see patterns. Oh, every time I rush, I make calculation errors. That realization is worth more than 10 correct homework assignments. 4. Reciprocal teaching. One of the best applications of Flavell's work is reciprocal teaching, developed by Palinsar and Brown, heavily influenced by metacognitive theory. This involves students taking turns being the teacher in small groups. They predict, question, clarify, and summarize. This forces metacognition because you cannot teach something you don't understand. If a student tries to summarize a paragraph and can't, the metacognitive alarm goes off. They realize they have a gap in their knowledge. It externalizes the internal monitoring process. The pitfalls. The illusion of competence. We can't talk about metacognition without addressing its evil twin, the illusion of competence. This happens when a student reads a chapter and thinks, yeah, I got this, but actually understands nothing. They recognize the words, so they mistake familiarity for mastery. Flavell's theory helps us understand why this happens, a failure of monitoring. The student isn't checking their understanding against a standard. They are just cruising. To combat this, we need to introduce desirable difficulties. We need to test them frequently. When a student fails a low-stakes quiz after thinking they knew the material, it is a wake-up call. It shatters the illusion. It forces a recalibration of their metacognitive judgment. It aligns their feeling of knowing with their actual knowing. Metacognition and the modern student. In the age of Google and ChatGPT, Flavell's theory is more relevant than ever. Information is cheap. Facts are everywhere. We don't need students who can act as hard drives. We need students who can act as processors. When a student uses AI to generate an essay, they are bypassing the cognitive struggle. But more importantly, they are bypassing the metacognitive loop. They aren't planning, they aren't monitoring, and they aren't evaluating. They are outsourcing their executive function. As educators, we have to lean into metacognition to keep education human. We have to teach students to question sources, to check their own biases, a form of person variable, and to regulate their attention in a world designed to distract them. The task variable of the modern world is one of infinite distraction. If a student doesn't know that their phone is a barrier to deep work, they will never reach their potential. Critiques and nuance. Of course, no theory is perfect. Some critics argue that Flavell's distinction between cognition and metacognition is a bit blurry. Where does thinking stop and thinking about thinking begin? If I double-check a math problem, is that a cognitive step in the algorithm or a metacognitive step? In reality, the line is fuzzy, but for educators, the distinction is useful even if it isn't scientifically perfect. It gives us a vocabulary to talk about the hidden curriculum of learning. Another challenge is that metacognition takes time and mental energy. It is cognitively expensive. Students and adults are cognitive misers. We like to save energy. Thinking about thinking is hard work. It requires a level of effort that many students are resistant to. Teachers often face pushback when they ask students to reflect or plan, because the students just want to get it done. Overcoming this resistance requires building a classroom culture where the process is valued as much as the product. John Flavell gave us a gift. He moved the conversation from how much can a child remember to how does a child know what they remember. He turned the lights on in the black box of the mind. For the educator, embracing Flavell's metacognition theory is about shifting control. It's about moving from a model where the teacher drives the bus and the students are passengers to a model where the teacher is the driving instructor. We sit in the passenger seat. We have a brake pedal on our side, just in case, but the goal is to get the student to check their mirrors, watch their speed, and know where they are going. We want students who can say, "I don't get this yet, but here is my plan to figure it out." We want students who know their own blind spots. We want students who can self-correct before they crash. In the long run, the facts we teach them might fade. They might forget the date of the Battle of Hastings or the formula for a quadratic equation. But if we teach them the metacognitive skills to approach a new difficult task, break it down, monitor their progress, and evaluate their success, that is a skill that sticks. That is the skill that gets them through college, through their first job, and through life. Flavell showed us that intelligence isn't fixed. It's not just about the horsepower of the engine. It's about the skill of the driver. And as excellent educators, our job is to train the best drivers on the road. It's not about making learning easy. It's about making learning conscious. That is the true power of metacognition.